Howdy again everyone. At the end of last year, Fuji got really busy launching all kinds of new lenses for their aps-c X-mount camera system, and here is one of them, the XF 70-300mm f4 to 5.6 R LM OIS WR. Being a weatherproofed lens in their high-end XF lineup, it predictably costs a fair bit of money at $800 US or £729 here in the UK. But if the lens turns out to be any good, then it could be of serious interest for all kinds of photographers. Its zoom range is the full frame equivalent of about 105 to 450mm, so it is telephoto all the way, offering fantastic reach for all kinds of telephoto work, and yet the lens itself is not too big, resulting in a nice portable piece of kit. The lens's body itself is made of a mixture of metal and heavy-duty plastic. It weighs only 580 grams or just under 1.5 pounds. It's weather sealed also throughout and tightly assembled, although there is a little bit of wobbling inside if you shake it when your camera is turned off. At the rear of the lens lies an aperture control ring, which turns with fairly soft clicks and can be disabled altogether if you want. Then comes the rubberized zoom ring. That turns relatively smoothly and evenly, and with just the right amount of stiffness to avoid zoom creeping, although still it can be locked at 70mm for storage. The lens is definitely not parfocal, by the way, for those video makers who are interested in such things. And then at the front comes the manual focus ring. It too is rubberized and, as usual for a Fuji lens, it turns extremely smoothly, but also, as usual for a Fuji lens, the focus motor's response to turning it is really quite jerky. I have never figured out why so many Fuji lenses I've tested seem to have this issue. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Some good news though is that the lens doesn't seem to exhibit focus breathing, as you can see here. Well, not much of it anyway. The autofocus motor, for me, worked fairly quickly, averagely quickly I suppose, making very faint electronic noises as it goes. Its accuracy could be slightly hit and miss in low light situations, but generally it did work fine for me. Something else important to mention is this lens's image stabilization, which is turned on and off in the camera's menu system. Here's some footage with it turned off and now turned on. As you can see, it's doing a very good job at keeping your image steady at this very long focal length. Fuji's image stabilization is nearly always some of the best there is actually, but something to mention is that it responds in quite a jerky way to you tilting and panning the camera around. The lens's front filter size is 67mm wide, and it comes with a fairly deep plastic hood. Overall, really nice build quality here. You are certainly getting your money's worth, and I particularly liked its nice, steady image stabilization. Now, let's look at image quality. I'll be testing the lens on a Fuji X-T3 with its 26MP aps-c sized sensor. At 70mm and f4, straight away we see excellent sharpness and contrast in the middle of the image. The further good news is that things are just as sharp over in the corners too. Impressive. The lens stays this sharp down to about f11, where the effects of diffraction begin to soften the image a little. Let's zoom in halfway now to 150mm. The maximum aperture has now darkened to f5. The middle of the image looks, again, razor sharp, very encouraging. The corners look nearly as sharp, but we also see a little less contrast there. Stop down to f8 for a slightly punchier image in those corners, and that is as sharp as they get at 150mm. Finally, let's zoom all the way into 300mm, where the maximum aperture is now f5.6. The great news is that picture quality is still fantastically sharp in the middle of the image. However, those image corners now look noticeably softer with lower contrast. f8 looks just a tiny bit better, and that's as sharp as the image gets. So, generally speaking, this is one sharp telephoto lens, particularly at its widest angles. Its only slip-up is at 300mm with those somewhat softer corners, but they're not terribly bad, and generally, you tend to shoot subjects at 300mm, so those corners will very often be out of focus anyway. Alright, well, let's move on and look at distortion and vignetting. Your Fuji camera automatically corrects these for you, but here are some raw images so we can see the true performance. At 70mm and f4, we see lots of pincushion distortion and some pretty dark corners. Stop down to f5.6 or f8 for those corners to brighten up. As you zoom all the way into 300mm, that distortion reduces but never fully goes away. The corners are still a little dark here at the new maximum aperture of f5.6, but stop down to f8 and they brighten up well enough. This lens can focus down to about 83cm, which is really nice and close for pictures of smaller subjects. However, at f5.6, image quality kind of falls apart, with contrast especially bottoming out. Stop down to f8 and contrast greatly increases, although the close-up image quality is still a little soft. Now, let's see how the lens works against bright lights. When zoomed out, we don't really see much in the way of flaring. However, zoom in, and if a light source is directly in your field of view, then you can provoke some flaring. And finally, bokeh. If you zoom right into your subject and keep your aperture open, then autofocus backgrounds will be your reward. They generally look just a tiny bit edgy here, although more deeply autofocus backgrounds do look fairly nice and smooth. Overall, well, I was really pleased to hear of the development of this Fuji lens. A 70 to 300mm lens on an aps-c camera goes a really long way, while still remaining fairly small and portable. It was when I saw this lens's build and image quality that I became really impressed. It is fantastic to handle and nice and sharp too, with very good contrast. Its solid image stabilization means you will get sharp images out of it quite easily, although the somewhat dark maximum aperture means it won't be so great for sports photography where you need really fast shutter speeds. Still, I don't know many sports photographers who shoot on Fuji, do you? Well, anyway, the lens is expensive but excellent, and it's my favourite telephoto zoom lens on a Fuji system, so it comes highly recommended. Well, while sports photography using a Fuji camera might sound a little crazy, what is definitely not crazy is checking out my Patreon page down in the description below. Over there, supporters of this channel get all kinds of exclusive bonus content, as well as feeling warm and fuzzy inside for helping these lens reviews keep trucking on. See you next time.